Thank you for having me. I'm really grateful to be here and really enjoyed the first day of all the presentations yesterday, and I'm excited to kick this off for you today. So my name is Josh Hadro. I'm the managing director of something called the IIIF Consortium. I'll get to that in just a bit and explain a bit about what that is. But really, the topic here to start us off is this idea of digital abundance or digitization abundance. So I come from the library and museum side of the industry, so I'll really be focusing on what that means in terms of like digitized assets and things like that. So digitization abundance. But I think I saw a few hands in the audience yesterday when somebody asked if there were academics. So I also teach at a library school. So I figured it might be useful to start out just from the first principles of how we got here and describe the problem a little bit. So in thinking about this, this was how I formulated it. I think this is probably pretty uncontroversial. Most people in this room would probably agree that images are pretty fundamental information carriers in terms of transmitting information about cultural context, cultural heritage. So after the written word, there's just such power in the images that we take of artistry and craftsmanship and all these things, and using that to inform people about their own background and cultural heritage, and then the backgrounds and contexts of other cultures. So that's kind of where we started, right? The power of the images. And so following from that, then, museums and libraries have spent quite a long time digitizing this stuff. So you see an image here. This is a copy stand if you've never seen it, but basically a very high-resolution camera goes up on that arm there. And then on that table, that's where you put the medieval manuscripts or the books, the maps, the photographs, all this stuff that museums and libraries have. We've spent a long time digitizing these things. And not just a long time doing it, we've spent a generation taking this massive effort. And it's kind of amazing to think about the fact that thousands of these institutions around the world have marshaled the energy and the funding and the expertise to get this done. So we've digitized millions of things, right? Europeana links to something like 35 million items. The Digital Public Library of America in the US has 20-some million items. Polona here has 3 million items. We have a ton of stuff, which kind of brings us to, that was an amazing effort, but I think in doing that, we've created a little bit of a problem for ourselves. So the way I'd phrase it is in kind of two categories. So after this 20-year effort, we've kind of created a problem of pixel abundance and a related problem of just this asset abundance. So pixel abundance, I mean, quite literally, these are just huge images. So that camera that I was showing you, that can take images up to a gigabyte in size, every click of the camera. So you think about how powerful the camera is in your pocket. The leading cameras for cultural heritage digitization are these massive images that they're delivering. And so that's just a big problem on the web for things like mobile web browsers. It's just hard to deliver that many pixels and do it usefully to the end users. But I have good news for you. This is where IIIF comes into the equation. So this is a standard, an open technology standard that was designed basically to solve this problem. And so I've said IIIF a bunch. What it actually stands for is this long set of words. It is the International Image Interoperability Framework. And because that is a lot of words and syllables, we almost always say IIIF. And so what that is the open standard that I mentioned. It is a completely open set of APIs and technologies that serve as a model for representing digital objects online, and then doing things like annotating those digital objects, and doing it in a completely standardized way across all these institutions. And when you get that completely standardized layer across things, you start to get a lot of interesting benefits, which will help address some of that second issue with the asset abundance. But I think it's important to mention, because it's an open community and an open standard, when we say IIIF, we also are generally referring to the body of people who make this work, who are writing the APIs and helping us develop them, and then implementing those and exposing their collections using these sets of APIs. And it's a truly global community. So the technology has only been around less than 10 years, and we've seen adoption around the world. So the red dots there are implementations that we know about. The blue dots are actually the institutions that have come together to fund the consortium, to actually sustain this effort. And the National Library of Poland was one of the founding members of this consortium. And so we're really grateful for that effort and for the other funders who've really helped spread this technology. You can see a few of the institutions here. So we've had a lot of uptake in national libraries and research university settings. Museums and galleries are actually a growing domain for us as well. And the aggregators are starting to become an interesting solution to that asset aggregation problem too. So the Digital Public Library of America in the United States, similar to Europeana, Internet Archive, very large scale institutions like that. But maybe the easiest thing to do is actually show you what the IIIF APIs mean in context. So take that example I was talking about, just enormous digitized images that you want to deliver over the web, right, through a standard web browser, or even a phone web browser. You want to be able to deliver that entire asset in all of its depth, but you also don't want to have to force someone to download a gigabyte of information. So this is an open standard way of solving this problem. So this example here comes from Stanford University. This is an enormous map. It's a Japanese tax map, and you're meant to actually stand in the center of it and be able to read the names of the locations around you. And so you can see this IIIF interface is giving you that entire image, but also allowing you to zoom and drag and get all the way down to the little microscopic detail. And you can see, you saw just a minute ago, the guy standing in the side of the picture, his name is Wayne. Wayne is the photographer who took this image. So Wayne is about 2 meters tall, which makes this map about 2 Waynes tall by 3 Waynes wide. So this is an enormous image that's many gigabytes in size. So in addition to delivering that highest resolution deep zoom capability, there's also an important piece of selecting a region of an image that's baked into IIIF, and not just selecting a region, but actually being able to generate a URL for every piece of every image. So this is a tool from the University College of Dublin that allows you to address a particular portion of the image and then generate a URL that refers to that section. And annotations are something really deeply baked into the APIs of IIIF. And so this is an example from a cell biology course. And so using that really high resolution imagery to show students exactly what's happening in a cell, and then overlaid with annotations on top of it that are actually describing at all the different levels of that cellular biology what's happening and how these segments of the cell actually interconnect. And because this is a completely open standard, there's a lot of different ways of viewing these materials. So here's some popular browsers: the Mirador Viewer, the Universal Viewer, the Internet Archive's Book Viewer. And the Cutter Digital Library actually makes a really interesting choice. For all the things that they've digitized and made available, they actually present 4 different options for the viewers so that the users can make the choice of what they actually want to be able to access. So that's a little bit about the pixel abundance. We've kind of solved that. IIIF was designed to solve that. And then asset abundance is kind of the connected problem. This idea that there are just tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of these assets out there. We spent a generation accumulating these things. And I think it's starting to get hard to understand at this point exactly maybe even why we've digitized so much stuff, right? There's more stuff than any one person could ever use or manipulate in a lifetime. So I mentioned that I teach at a library school. This is something that we talk about in the intro classes there. There was a librarian named Ranganathan, and this is Ranganathan's 5 Laws of Library Science. So he's talking about the context of books in 1931. So books are for use, every person his or her book, every book its reader, and so on. So with apologies to Rang and Nathan, there are attempts to update these every so often, and so this is a version that maybe describes the digital library and the digital assets and what we've done with it. And I think in particular what's useful is this second and third bit here. And so again, in 1931, he's already taking a very user-centric view of why these things exist. And I think maybe we've lost that a little bit, and it's time to return to it. So this idea of focusing on every user having a digital asset that speaks to that person. And every digital asset has a user that it's sort of meant to speak to. And so in the context of IIIF, this normalization layer actually helps us think through that in a little bit. So this is an example of how this works in a single institution. That layer of normalizing kind of enables the delivery of the images or the delivery of the annotations and work like that. And so this makes sense in the context of one institution. But where this really starts to change the game for the industry a little bit is in the context of many institutions. So when you have that normalization layer and it's an open standard across all these different places, you start to get the ability to synthesize collections across institutional boundaries and start to be able to think a little bit more holistically about what the users might need and how you might group these things so that they're useful to them. And then to do interesting things like working with the annotations and other functionality. So again, maybe to just show you some of the ways that this works in living examples with IIIF. So this is a single viewer pulling in images from Oxford, Stanford, and Yale. So this is an example use case just of Shakespeare materials, but very easy to just grab URLs of items and then compare them in a single interface. This is one of my favorite examples. So this is a manuscript from the 15th century, an illuminated manuscript. And more than 100 years ago, the most beautiful parts of this manuscript were literally cut out of the object and then sold separately. And so the two parts of this manuscript are still in Paris. They're not even a mile apart, I think. But in terms of digital objects, they might as well be on different continents, right? The chances of a user finding these two things are very unlikely. Except that they've been digitized by IIIF compliant institutions. And as a result, the Bibliothèque Nationale in France was able to create this interface very simply to reunify these objects. And so to still allow for that deep zoom and allow these objects to be seen in the original context where they were originally created. So that reunification was made possible through the shared APIs. And this is an example that comes from the museum side of our community. So this idea of focusing on storytelling and context around items. This is a company called CogApp that's created an open tool called Stories. And so they allow institutions to put together these viewing models. And so to allow users to still kind of drag around the image and zoom in and out and experience the item on their own, but also adding that annotation layer that gives them a little bit of context and then gives them a guided tour of what's happening with these different objects. So I think that gives you a sense of some of the possibilities, right? And so it's the institutions themselves and some of these user-focused places that need to do the work to actually figure out how the assets are best positioned for end users and to do the research and the study to figure out like what the collections are that we need to be synthesizing and creating. But it's that IIIF toolkit that makes this pretty straightforward and again, in a totally open way, so there's no cost to doing this. There's just the work to do the implementation. Maybe some of the last things I'll touch on here are this work to do discovery across these different items. So that's actually the next IIIF API that we're creating, is this discovery API. So to allow users to search for IIIF-enabled materials in a particular domain, say, or on a particular topic, right? So if they're interested in maps of Warsaw from a certain period, or medieval manuscripts from describing a certain set of content, this would work with that, and it would ideally, it's meant to work in conjunction with things like Europeana or with Polona or these existing search tools to make the IIIF aspect of these toolkits work a little bit more coherently. So that's a quick overview of the problem and the way IIIF kind of comes into this. I'll leave you with these last couple thoughts here, but we're always eager to have people adopt this and tell us about it, particularly so we can add that dot to the map. So exposing collections through IIIF, talking to vendors is a great way to do it, but also joining the community. So if there's anything I've said that's of interest, come let me know, and I can connect you with some of the parts of the museum side or the discovery side of the community to get that work done. And there's a couple of ways to connect with us, but this is all available on our website. And of course, I'm happy to chat with you in any way, give you whatever information I can. And I'll end there. So thank you very much for having me.